Hola! Today we're going to talk about the different types of verbs that we have in Spanish. They are so complicated, but not if you get them organized. So let's get them organized. What types of verbs do we have? First of all, I want to tell you about the irregular verbs. We have regular and irregular. So irregular verbs first, they do not follow a pattern. Sadly, we have to memorize them. I told you before my experience when I learned English. And in English, there are also irregular and regular verbs. So the first time I learned how to say the verb to be, which is an irregular verb, I started conjugating the verb saying I be, you be, he be, and people were looking at me like, what are you talking about? Isn't the name of the verb to be? So I was just using the verb to be with I, you, he, she, and so on. But no, to be is an irregular verb, and you write it like I am, you are, he is. The am has nothing to do with the verb name, right? To be. Why I am? Where did am come from? Where did you are come from if the verb is to be? That's complicated. But yeah, the same thing happens in Spanish. We have the name of the verb to be in Spanish is ser, and then we conjugate it with different words that we need to memorize, like yo soy, tú eres, él es, nosotros somos, ustedes son, ellos son. So these verbs are irregular. Here you have the name of the verb and then the conjugation of the verb. Then you have the name of the verb in Spanish and then the conjugation of the verb. And as I said before, irregular verbs are verbs that we need to memorize. We need to learn how to say them. They do not follow a pattern. We have to memorize them. The good news is that there are just some irregular verbs. Most of the verbs are regular. They follow a pattern, so we don't have any trouble learning that pattern. So other verbs that are irregular and we need to memorize are, for example, the verb ser, which means to be, the verb estar, which also means to be, but just for condition, location, and emotion. So when we are talking about how we are feeling or where we are, we use the verb estar instead of ser. And another useful verb that is irregular and we'll need to memorize is the verb ir, to go. Okay? We'll talk about that one later in class. The verb ir, to go, is irregular, so we'll need to memorize how to say that. Now let's talk about also some other verbs that are called verbs like gustar. Verbs like gustar have a funny thing. They use a different pronoun. They don't use yo, tú, usted. They use different pronouns. So we have the pronoun me for I like, te for you like, le for he likes or she likes, nos for we like, les and les for you all like and they like. I know you know how to use the verb gustar because you've done a lot of work using me gusta, te gusta, le gusta, and things like that. Now, the challenge is not to get them confused with the other pronouns. That's why we are organizing them today. Let's move on. So, in conjugation, when we talk about conjugation, it only means that we are going to use each pronoun and the verbs. So in English, you have the pronouns I, you, he, she, and you formal, we, you all, and they. In Spanish, when we use gustar, we use me gusta, te gusta, le gusta, nos gusta, les gusta, and les gusta. But the meaning of I is also yo. So we have two ways of saying I for a verb. Yo for normal verbs and me for verbs like gustar. We use you in most of the verbs. We say tú, but in the verbs like gustar, we say te gusta. So as you can see, these columns are to show you that we have two ways of saying I, two ways of saying you, two ways of saying él, ella, or usted, and le, he, she, you, formal, and so on. We can say it as nosotros or nos when we are saying nos gusta, we like. You all becomes ustedes for normal verbs, most of them, and les for verbs like gustar. And they, in English, we say it two ways. Ellos and ellas, or les for verbs like gustar. But most of the time, we're going to use the green section right here, okay? These pronouns are the ones that we're going to use for most of the conjugation of verbs. There are just a bunch of them that use me, te, le, and so on. So we're going to focus on these ones. Yo, tú, él, ella, usted, nosotros, ustedes, ellos. And remember, we have motions for those, right? Yo, tú, él, ella, nosotros, ustedes, ellos, and ellas. And we use those for conjugation. Now, let's move to the next slide. Here we go. So we're going to have conjugation charts. In the future, you're going to use some conjugation charts to remind you how to say some things. You can go to these charts anytime you don't remember how to say a verb. Most of the times, you're only going to have the Spanish version of the chart. So use this one, the English, just to remember what's the meaning of I, yo, you, tú, she, he, you, formal, él, ella, or usted, we, nosotros, you all, ustedes, they, ellos, and ellas. But normally, you're going to find it like this, okay? So a chart of 6 boxes where we're going to learn how to say I something, you something, he or she something. We are just going to fill them in with the verb conjugation. We're also going to have a section where we're going to have the title of the chart, the infinitive verb. So the infinitive verb is kind of the name of the verb. Like, for example, the verb to be, or to jump, or to write. That's the name of the verb. The name of the verb starts with to something. And in Spanish, instead of starting with to something, the infinitive verbs end with these endings. AR, ER, or IR. So, for example, hablar ends with AR. Comer, to eat, ends with ER. Subir, to go up, ends with IR. So in Spanish, they end like this when they are the title of the verb. And in English, they start like this when they are the name of the verb. Okay? Let's say, for example, the infinitive verb is to talk. That's the name of the verb. In Spanish, the name of the verb is hablar. So that will be the title of the chart. Then we're going to fill in the chart saying, how do I say I talk, you talk, he, she talks, we talk, you all talk, they talk. So we're going to fill these charts with the words that we need to conjugate the verb, whatever verb we're talking about. And that's what we're going to do next. And you're going to have a little manual where you can see those. But first, we're going to learn how to fill the chart. And then once you have the chart, you can use it to say things that you want. Okay? So let's get to work.